Welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast, hosted by Jason Barbato.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast. I'm your host, Jason Barbato, along with producer and best sidekick ever, Miss Marissa Callie. Marissa, how you doing today?
I'm well. Happy to see you. It's been a while since we've done one of these. I don't know, maybe a week. Yeah, super happy to be back and really looking forward to this conversation because it's definitely something that we haven't covered too much on the podcast yet, but definitely are going towards that realm. So why don't you give us a little background of who we're going to talk to today, or you are going to talk to?
Absolutely. Yeah, the conversation we're going to have today, folks, is really going to be important for coaches. I think it's going to be important for players, student athletes. I think it's going to be really important for parents. So we're going to be speaking with Elliot Mark of Fluency, who's a friend who's introduced to me to another guest that we had on the show previously, Mr. Andrew Hosmer. And Elliot's going to come on the show. He's going to tell us how to kind of tap into getting through all the noise that's out there and getting your kids in front of the right coaches and the right programs across the country. So, Elliot, why don't you go ahead, Marissa, and bring Elliot on the show, and let's get into it. Elliot, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Welcome. We're so glad to have you
Thanks.
today.
Of course, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Elliot, if you don't mind just sharing first with the audience kind of where are you coming in from as far as where are you while we're recording this today?
Yeah, I am in the mountains of Aspen, Colorado, taking a little vacation, trying to rejuvenate and just relax a little bit because, like yourself, it is a 24/7 job trying to get the right information out there to the people. So just chilling out a little bit, and it's great that we could do it from here.
Yeah. I just want to make a quick note real quick. Marissa dipped out of our podcast real fast just for anybody listening or the audience at home. So Marissa, we'll see you a little bit towards the end of the show. Want to make sure that, she pulled the Irish dip there real quick. So I just want to make sure we call that one out. Elliot, if you wouldn't mind getting into it, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your personal pathway in regards to soccer. If you could just share a little bit about your story in regards to, the game of soccer, yourself as an athlete, college player, post-college career, kind of what that looked like. So can you kind of paint a picture for our audience first for us contextually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
So I was really fortunate. From a young age, I was surrounded by incredible coaches and mentors. For example, Bobby Montgomery, who was the director of the Red Bulls Academy, was one of my first coaches growing up. Kevin Anderson, who's now the head coach at Columbia, was an incredible mentor, still is to this day in my life. Gary Book, who is a tactical genius when it comes to the understanding of the game, right? Its principles, how to defend, how to attack, everything I've learned really came from Gary Book. And he actually helped mentor me through the recruitment process. So it was my educational pathway into college. And that ended up at Lehigh University, which was an incredibly fantastic experience for me, but I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. My expectation going into school that I was to play at a Division I school, but then also compete at a really academic-oriented university. Managing those two things is really tough. So if I were to do it over again, I might not have landed at Lehigh. I think I might, with the knowledge that I have now and what I try to bestow to all the athletes that I work with, I probably would have ended up at a less school academically.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have had a lot better time management to do, put towards soccer, because balancing that is extremely tough. So, and with that said, Jason, I had an amazing career. I wouldn't change it for the world. But if I were to look at it from an academic standpoint, I would maybe make a different decision. Now, when it comes to my role at Lehigh University, I was fortunate once again. I started as a freshman, which is an anomaly, especially in today's, game.
Right. And you started playing as a freshman, right? Because everyone starts as a freshman, but you started playing.
I'm sorry. I started as right back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Everyone
common,
does
not
start
common
as
at
a
all.
freshman.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Not
Yeah, I
common,
was.
Yeah.
So starting as an outside back and really getting some good accolades. Patriot League Rookie Player of the Week. Came in runner up for Rookie of the Season to one of my best friends who actually played at American University. With that said, I went on to be the captain, 2-year captain at Lehigh University, and I was moved into the central back position. And that was really the position where I flourished just because of my communication, my understanding of the game tactically, where people needed to be on the field like that blade of grass, right? Where I needed to pull people back into, hold people accountable. It was just the right position for me. And Dino did a great job, Dean Koski at Lehigh, to really, foster that and provide me with that confidence to play in that position. Right out of college, I went into coaching, and that's because I had some injuries in my final season. I redshirted for a year, so I went on and didn't have the career professionally that I dreamed of having, but I parlayed that right into coaching at Florida Atlantic University, where I learned a ton, and I was the head of recruitment for almost 5 years, just 4.5 years I was with the program. We went on to win a conference championship, and I was able to bring in national team players to a fairly, above average program, but not a Clemson, not a Virginia, not a Duke. And it was really because of the way we recruited. And it was multifaceted, and we took a business game and bringing kids in, and we really made sure that they were successful after college, right? Whether that was playing, whether that was in the business world, they had a lot of success. And then from there on, I've owned some small businesses helping the youth development throughout the country, tactically, technically, just passing on that knowledge that Gary provided, Dino provided. And now I'm working at Recruit Fluency, founder of a recruitment company. I want to say, I don't want to say a service or an agency. We're a little bit different. We want to educate parents on the process. We want to get to parents early, show them the path so that they can take their son or daughter through the recruitment process themselves without having to outsource their child's future to a service or an agency and maybe get pulled in the wrong direction. So
yeah. And I was wondering if you might be able to make that connection for us. So, you head up the recruitment department at FAU for 5 years, and then you kind of, through a series of other companies, you see not only just an opportunity for a company, but you also see the opportunity to provide a service, right? That you see something in the marketplace that needs to be there. Can you kind of talk a little bit to kind of what that need is? Because, I don't know that every parent in the country, or that every parent, not every parent has a 4 or 5 star recruit, so to speak. And so what are we really talking about, like in the college recruitment process? And who's kind of the target audience, for your company and for your guys' services that you provide?
Sure. So we really are speaking to the parent because, one, they're the decision makers, right, in this process. They will take the bull by the horns without a doubt, just because they understand how important that college experience is to their son or daughter, and that the son or daughter might not understand that unequivocally, at this moment in time. They're a little immature and they need to go through the process and understand it themselves. So our target market is parents. What we do at Recruit Fluency is we educate parents, and we do that through a series of master courses. We have 5 modules and 25 videos. So we've broken the recruitment process down into selecting a group of target schools. So how to go about that. We break it down into academics, social life, environment, and then athletics, right? And we want to make sure the ultimate question there is, without athletics, are you still going to be happy at that university? Like myself, I had injuries. There was times I didn't get on the pitch, even though I was a starter as a freshman. Yeah. Things happen, right? So we want to make sure that ultimately we're there for the academic success for our future, right? And that's really what we preach fundamentally. After that, we teach parents and student athletes how to communicate with coaches, whether that's via email. Social media today is a huge opportunity, but also a huge, you could throw away some opportunity as well if you're not buttoned up on your social media side.
Yeah.
And then how coaches evaluate the student athlete, right? So to give you an understanding of what they're really looking for, I spoke about that blade of grass, right? Like where you're technically and tactically at, what level do you understand the game at? Some of the things they look at. Then we go into how to understand and differentiate the target schools that you've come up with, right? So what are some of the questions you're going to ask when you're on an official and an unofficial visit? What are you going to ask the coach? What is the coach going to ask you? What should you be asking the players? What are the players going to ask you? What should parents try to ask the coach? And what should they maybe stay away from, for now? And then lastly, we go through the application and the financial aid aspect to it, right? So how do you get loans? Where can you go to, set up the FAFSA correctly and try to get some money academically, financial aid wise, and create a package, right? Because everyone thinks about a scholarship as just athletic. And there's so many other ways to get aid financially rather than just the athletic piece, because a small piece of the student athlete body are the ones that are getting that athletic scholarship.
Right. And I wonder if you might be able to speak a little bit to kind of the pathway for boys and girls. I imagine that they're not identical. I imagine they have some similarities, but they've got some key differences. So can you kind of like lay out what those similarities and what those differences are for the parents of, male student athletes and female student athletes?
Whenever I've coached on the female side, everything's been a lot more organized, right? And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if that's just the nature of human beings.
Oh, come on. Are you sure you're not sure why?
yeah, right. It's probably why, right, Jay? It's probably why. And the reality is that actually works out well because the female game recruitment starts earlier, 100%. The male game, the male side of things is a little bit later, but I still think that parents aren't educating themselves about the process early enough. So that, I just had a couple of interviews with D1 coaches, D3 coaches, and they tell me, so this isn't my opinion, right? This is what they're telling me. It starts in the 8th grade. And I know that sounds like crazy, right? But the reality is you're not acting on that recruitment process. You're educating yourself, right? So doing the research, coming to somewhere like Recruit Fluency where you can get that information. And if it's not from me, that's fine. There's websites to learn from. But what you need to be wary of is the services and the agencies that are pitching scholarship opportunities. That's that red flag, right? So just getting back to your question, it starts early, and the best way to be seen is to play at the highest level possible, right? So today it's ECNL, it's MLS Next, right? Some of these programs, but they're changing. I mean, EDP just came out with a new program, right? So I don't want to just give you a program, the highest level possible, whatever that is. When you play, you need to play at that level to get the most visibility from college coaches.
Right. And I almost wonder for boys if the process starts a little bit later, because for I think in the mindset of most teenage boys, the collegiate pathway is the fallback plan if the professional pathway doesn't present itself soon enough, especially those playing at the high level, DA, ECNL, things like that. Is that, you think that kind of falls in line, or just boys just tend to think about it a little bit later?
I think ego is a huge part of this recruitment process, and we speak about it at length, right? And it's from the parents as well. If you're not aware, if you don't have self-awareness around who you are as a player and as an athlete, as a student, academically speaking, you're going to waste thousands of dollars throughout this process, right? Because people are always trying to sell you on something that they have. And that might look like an opportunity at a Virginia ID camp. That might look like an opportunity at, an ID camp that has 45 coaches coming to it. But the question I ask parents is, are those schools aligned with your son and your daughter's academic and athletic prowess, if you will, right? Is that going to be a good fit? I went to UConn soccer camp with Ray Reid, right? One of the best coaches in the world. Did I get something out of it? Of course, because every time you're touching the ball, you're getting something out of it, right? But I was foolhardy to believe that I was going to play at that level. It would have made more sense for me to go to Lehigh University's camps and schools of that level. Right. So check that ego. And that's such a huge part of it for sure.
Kind of looking maybe at the other side of the phone, if you will, in the recruitment process, and kind of thinking about it from the coach's perspective, since you have a lot of experience there. What type of what's recruitment look like for college coaches? What are the ways that coaching staffs across the country, how are they currently recruiting players? What services or programs that they're using? If Recruit Fluency is there for parents and the parents of players and players themselves, what are the programs and what are kind of the tools that coaches have on the other side of the aisle? What does that look like?
Well, it's really interesting, right? So most and it's different at every level, right? So Division 1 to Division 3 is going to be slightly different. There are Division 3 programs that are just as good as Division 1 programs, right? So
name them right now.
Messiah. What an incredible, they beat us in preseason, I think, when I was with Lehigh, 1-0, and I was taken back by the absolute, incredible.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. All right, so you named one.
I had it up there ready to go for you. Right? If I'm going to say that, I need to be able to back it up.
Yeah, back it up, Elliot, right now. Yeah. So go get back to your point.
Sorry. Right. Not a problem. So, now I'm off track. Now I lost my thought.
Yeah.
So
Division 1 to Division 3 schools.
Right. It's going to be a lot different, right?
Yeah.
What coaches tell me, what I did 15 years ago, I guess is sort of irrelevant. What's happening today, right? So I want to give you that information. Every coach is paid a salary to recruit players. They are not using a lot of these services and agencies, especially at the higher caliber, athletic programs. And the reason is because they need to get eyes on players, and they do that by going to the highest level possible. So they're out there at MLS Next. They're out there at ECNL.
Yeah.
They're out there at all of those events. Now, what can you do as a student athlete to maximize awareness for yourself? Is make sure you are professionally persistent when reaching out to them and letting them know that you're interested, not only on an athletic level, but also an academic level. And then either write to them, follow up with a phone call, and really understand the university when you reach out to them. Don't, speak in generalities. Speak to the coach as if you really know that program, and do your homework, do your research on that. So I think that's really the best answer I could provide for you.
Yeah. We had a coach, assistant coach, on the show previously. He kind of shared a couple of the programs that they're using. And he also talked about some of the challenges as a coach that he had, because the best place to go evaluate players right now is to go to these tournaments. And the challenge is unfortunately we don't have the technology or the capability to be two places at the same time. So what do you do when you have to watch more than one player and everything's at the same time? And let's say that kid has a rough game, or what the coach is doing there's 1,000 different factors, and we're still rolling the dice a little bit with luck being mixed in there. But I wonder, in your thoughts, as again, there were technologies you were and methodologies you were using up to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
How fast do you think everything is changing? Like how many years from right now do you think everything is going to be completely different than what the recruitment process looks like today?
Yeah, so I think the process is moving into a data science oriented um, direction, for
Hmm.
lack of better words. And the reason is because of some of the things you just brought up, right? Coaches cannot be at two places at once. And a lot of times they need to see players 4, 5, 6 times to make sure that they're passing the eye test over and over again. Because
Yeah.
the number one thing you could do as a player, and a lot of people don't understand this, is consistency, right? So if you have an incredible game one time and they see you 3 other times and you're just average, you go down in their charts,
Right.
right? So consistency is so important. So to get back to your question specifically, wearable technology is huge, right? And prior to the pandemic, I was working with a company called SoccerLAB out of Belgium. And what we did is we took all of this data that was now provided to coaches and we centralized it into one communicational port, right? So we brought everything in so that coaches could really identify, where players were at on a daily basis. In 5 to 10 years, maybe less, I believe it's going to move into that direction where coaches are relying on data from players to see their growth technically, right? They could see a lot from that. They can also really understand during the game, right? How hard are they working? There's so many different ways to break down this data. It's incredible. And some coaches are going to put more emphasis on, specific things like fitness and how much, mileage a center midfield covers throughout the game, right? Is he an 18 to 18 player, right? So everyone's going to have a different sort of take on the data, but that's why it's going to be so important because it's just another way to really solidify your initial thoughts on a player, right?
Right.
They usually correlate really well.
Yeah, I think that point is, I think it's really vital for parents to understand it, that what it's going to boil down to in the coming years for the parents of youth players and for youth players to kind of get it into their heads themselves is the better data you have, not the better stats, but the better data, recorded data, like the honest recorded data, and the better tools you have, the clearer the pathway is going to become for you.
For sure.
And I would wonder, for like, what would you say is like an appropriate age for parents and their youth player to kind of start having the conversation about like the college recruitment process or like their future pathways? Like what would you say is probably an appropriate age to start having that dialogue?
Let me preface it with saying, just because of what I'm going to say, like I said earlier, it's going to be young, right? But that doesn't mean you should stop playing other sports. I just want to preface it with that, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people get that confused. You should start talking about the college recruitment process and data and all of this stuff with your child as young as they are to be able to comprehend and maturely go about the process, right? So if I have a 9th grader and I know my son, right, and I'm aware that he might be a phenomenal player, but it might not be where he's at emotionally to get to the next level, maybe I wait off on that conversation. But generally speaking, it's like that 8th, 9th grade, right? Because you need to set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
In the 9th grade, you need to start going to ID camps that are the right fit for you as a player so that you can maximize that awareness, right? Maybe a coach that from Lehigh University was not able to see you at a tournament, but that's a school that fits you academically, environmentally, socially, and athletically. Then that's a target school of yours. You've identified that. Then you go down those paths to make sure you're seen in front of those coaches, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I think it's that 8th, 9th grade. Now, once again, being a multi-sport athlete, I think it's super important. So I played basketball. I almost played Division III basketball in school. It was something that I really took a serious look at. And ultimately, I made the decision I made. But playing basketball, even like wrestling, some of the best soccer players I see out there are wrestlers. They have incredible centers of gravity, right? There's so many other sports that can be, really advantageous for your kids to continue to do, even while they're pursuing a college, opportunity.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of conversation around the cross sport, training and things like that. And it's always good just to break up the monotony. I know, I'm like I've shared with you before, I've got 2 girls that play, and, I like for them to be able to play flag football. Like they play on all girl flag football teams and boys leagues, and they've won some games against boys that are even older than them and stuff like that. And it's what a great boost for not only their confidence, but also it just kind of shows them, hey, athletically, like there's not just one box that we all fit in, I always laugh, even watching the NFL, Patrick Mahomes is not a bad he's not a bad quarterback at all. But from what I hear, he also was not a bad baseball player as well. Like there's going back to, when you and I were younger, there's the Bo Jacksons and the Deion Sanders of the world. So
absolutely,
it can be done. It's just not done that often anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think we've entered in kind of the era of, the single sport kind of mastery, instead of seeing really well-rounded athleticism, which kind of speaks to the larger narrative about American sports where, especially with soccer, we're just great athletes. We're not very good technically. And so I think there's a lot of subconscious, pining that we're kind of working out there.
Right.
I would, even for my girls, one of the conversations I started having very early on with them is, we talked about, that there are professional clubs all around the world, that, there's not one pathway as far as it just being collegiate, like there's professional too. Although in the United States, it's a lot more challenging for young girls, especially to sign like professional contracts. That pathway looks different than it does for boys with MLS Next and things like that. Right. So we're probably about 10 to 15 years behind that being the case for, say, the NWSL or the USLW or things like that. But I kind of just started seeding those conversations just to get them to dream and to think that, like, I could be doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And kind of that it's more of the pathway is long, because I think a lot of people out there are looking for the fastest way up the mountain, so to speak. Hey, what's the quickest way that I can get to a college scholarship? Hey, what's the quickest way that I can get signed to a pro team? And I really love the approach that you're talking about, because you're saying that, like, listen, just because you might be able to get to a school doesn't mean that it's a good school for you.
Yeah.
Because you are more than a player. You are a student athlete. Yeah. And like you experienced, long after your playing career, you have an opportunity to the game can take you really far, but your mind and your heart can take you further.
Yeah.
For most people, right? What's the percentage of people that end up playing professional, that go along that pathway?
It's less than 1%, right? I mean, I think it's less than 1%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really low. If you were to add up, Division 1 through 3, boys and girls programs in this country, and just throw like an estimated number of how many scholarships are out there, what would you kind of estimate that number to be?
Oh, geez, that's so hard, and that means I need to be decent at math. Yeah, it's not even possible. Sure. I'm sorry.
Well, how many Division 1 through 3 schools are there that even have soccer programs? Like, what are we looking at?
Like 800 schools on the men's side, and the women's side I'm not as educated. Okay. But what that looks like is a fully funded program is 9.9 scholarships, right?
Okay.
At FAU, which was a decent program, Division I, we weren't fully funded. We only had like 4 scholarships to work with. So we needed to spread that over, 26 players.
Right.
And there's a lot of universities that aren't fully funded. So, you need to take that into consideration. The reality is, statistically, 7% of high school athletes go on to play collegiately. Okay. 1% play Division I ball, and the rest, that's 6%, 5-6%, will play Division II, Division III. Okay. Now, a lot of players in high school, I firmly believe, do not try to play in college. because they don't have the right information. And I'm a firm believer that if you are a high school player, even a good high school player, but you have the passion, you have the drive to play at the college level, you can find a university that is going to be perfect for you. I mean, there are some great schools out there that people haven't heard of that have, great opportunities for players. And being part of a team at that level is so important, just because of the camaraderie and the culture, but also it sets you up for success after school, right? A lot of these teams have alumni that are incredibly, valuable to you when you come out of school and you need that first job to enter the market, right?
Right.
And that's really, what I preach throughout our platform and our program. For me, I think I want every player to try to pursue the professional level 100%, but be realistic and be self-aware. That's my message.
Yeah. I even think of the story with like a player like Matt Turner, who didn't really play too much high school soccer, so to speak, and kind of got converted in college, if you will, to be a goalkeeper.
Right.
Recently signed with Arsenal
Right.
and men's national team. So the beautiful thing is that just because it happened for one person doesn't mean it's going to happen for the next, but that there's a lot of ways for players to kind of tackle this mountain to take their talent as far as their potential can go. And it's the whole thing. We want to see more players and more student athletes continue to dream and to push themselves but you also have to be pushed where there's a good opportunity. Where there's a realistic opportunity. And I really appreciate what you had to say about ego, because, in my experience, even with the youth game, it's the ego of the parents or the ego of the player as a residual of the parents that tend to get a lot of the attention, because they tend to be the squeakiest, loudest, wheels on the sideline. But that doesn't also mean that that's always the best decision for a coach and or a program type deal too. So, thinking a little deeper about the data science aspect, that's a lot of what we've tried to take the approach from with Soccer Geeks and
Right.
give, along with what you're saying with that educational process of just what the pathway looks like. Because I think that, for student athletes, there's not a lot of high schools that are out there like having seminars for parents on how to kind of navigate college and the college pathway.
Right.
But even from a data standpoint, there still needs to be a level of education of what actually is valuable information for my kids as they're developing and as they're maturing and growing. And I say that because, we tend to only focus. You were a center back, right? So for years, if we only focused on state titles and goals, you won't have a very impressive resume. Right, because you played outside back, right? But so you're a defender
and move centrally, right? Yeah,
right. So, but again, how do we find out what kids who really have the highest ceilings as center backs, or have played a lot of positions or things like that around the field, and what are the type of metrics that we can start recording from the U9, U10 age to show a pattern of development? I heard a really
the pattern is super important. I'm sorry to interject.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about the pattern of development.
Yeah, pattern's really, really interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to consistency, which I spoke about. But it's really interesting to see that, one, that data, if kids aren't improving, year after year, season after season, it speaks to the coaching. Means we need to get better as a country educating our coaches, and I think that's a huge part of it, right? Because we tend in the system to put some of our weaker coaches with the U9s and U10s, and I think it should almost be opposite. So when you're looking at development, you want to see consistent development year after year, but then it would be really interesting to see the exponential growth of some of these players, as they mature. What is the season? Maybe it's junior year in high school, maybe it's sophomore year, that they really explode and they just get to that next level, for lack of better words, right? For me, if I'm looking at data and I'm looking at a player, and I've done it in my career, it's the players that are consistent and have that sort of measured growth because they keep going, right? And and they don't plateau. And you could see through data when kids plateau or athletes plateau. So that's what I get out of the patterning.
Well, I've talked about in the past that, there's no just straight uphill in regards to development.
For
So
sure.
my line of thought has always been there's times where players plateau. There's times where they actually decline, right? If you're taking that data, say, from a kid who's 10 years old, right, all the way to their 18, and they don't ever hit a plateau, I begin to worry. Because I worry if they get to my program, are they done peaking? Did they peak too early?
How long is that plateau?
Right. So I always like to look at are they plateauing? And even if they go, but have they faced adversity?
Yeah.
Some people, best team ever, top division team, always been on the best and been around the best. What happens when they're not around the best? What happens when they're not their best? How do they face adversity? So, but I guess if we were both college recruitment coaches, maybe we would look at it from a little bit of a different angle.
Of course.
But talk to me a little bit about what you just said as far as, the plateau. You said the length of the plateau, but can you talk a little bit about when players start to face adversity in their playing careers?
Sure. I was Dean Koski. I interviewed him the other day as well. And one of the things he said why he loves to invite recruits to his ID camps is because he knows it's not always going to be the best level, right? Like just by default, right? You're not going to have the best players. There's going to be some players that, are chasing their dreams, so to speak. How do those players that he knows have what it takes to play at that level? What are those intangibles? What do those look like, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to rise to the occasion? Or are they going to become leaders? Or are they going to, start yelling, start being, disrespectful to the coaching staff because they got taken off the field? Like, the maturity aspect, there's so many things that coaches look for that I thought was really interesting when it comes to what they also look at as far as when they plateau, right? And if you make a mistake, how quickly do you turn that mistake and get back into a positive mindset and be able to put it behind you? Super important.
Right. And I think that, going back to what you said about the fundamentals, that's why I think even at the coaching at the youngers, it's really important for kids to kind of face those environments early on.
Yeah.
I've, my kids don't play for first teams, you know what I mean? They're on second teams and things like that. And so, actually my youngest now does play for a first team this coming year. But, they're constantly put in environments where it's always second team against first team, and there's like this budding war when, and then the thing that we're always told by clubs is that, well, we're looking at them as a pool of players. It's like, okay, well, if we're looking at it as a pool of players, we probably should mix things up a little bit because you have to always put players in a place where they have an opportunity to rise, but they also have the opportunity to face some adversity and kind of break through. And if the same kids are always kind of at the top of the pecking order due to, puberty and physical strength and prowess and stuff like that, then you're really not giving everybody a chance to kind of face that adversity to see what they're really tested and made of. The other thing too is I was talking with I remember some article I think I was reading the other line talking about kind of the European approach of looking at the data science over years and looking at players that have played up a few years, especially players that develop really quickly from like a soccer talent aspect. We've got a lot of teenagers that are now going to play in Europe.
Yeah.
But when they have to face like adversity or maturity or an IQ, soccer IQ and technical ability that is some of them a decade older than they are. I think of like Jonathan Gomez, who plays, in USL, and now he's at in I think Porto B, playing in Portugal. But he's playing against grown men in the USL. Like he's playing some guys that played a lot of soccer and they've either kind of gone up and they kind of parachuted down to USL, or a lot of guys that they're journeymen or things like that. I mean, he's playing, he's a 16, 17-year-old kid playing against 28, 29-year-old guys they're not going easy on him. They're going pretty hard. But how did they respond to that adversity as well and push through?
Just a side note on that. Yeah. So Gary Book, who's at Adelphi University, Division II school, they are mopping the floor when it comes to possession, holding the ball, playing against Division I programs. Because at the Division II level, you need to understand that there are those 26, 27-year-olds from overseas, right? So in that level, you're competing with those players who have the physical maturity, because men at 27 hit their peak, right? So they're right around their peak. And you have an 18-year-old kid trying to get into that, break into that. There's going to be a lot of adversity to what you're speaking about. And it takes someone with a lot of mental aptitude to be able to, understand where they're at and break through in an environment like that. So sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, bring it. I mean, yeah, that's one of those things where, it's the first time you get punched in the mouth.
Right.
You find out, really what you're made of and how you respond to a situation where you're not alpha anymore. And you've got to kind of earn your time and fight for your spot. And, like you said, you earn the ability as a college freshman to be able to start on your team. Like, I'm sure there were guys in that locker room that had been there that felt that they were more deserving, or people that weren't happy that you had that. But at the same time, you earned it, but you also had to keep it. Yeah. And I think it's super good for players younger than that pathway to have that in high school, to find that ECNL, ECRL, the GA, the DPL, and even the Flight Ones, the kids that are trying to break through and get picked up to academies. Yeah. I think it's just really good to make sure, for parents. Okay, so help me. We're going to talk. I want to talk in closing a little bit. Just kind of, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of share with our audience, kind of give that final appeal for parents to check you guys out. But talk to me a little bit, like what you would say to parents that have kids at the club level. What do you think are the environments and the attributes, just like they would look in a college program? What do you think that are the attributes and kind of the philosophies and the relationship, even on the club level, that parents should be looking for the place that their kids are getting developed at the youth levels?
It's a great question. Okay. And because I don't believe it's done correctly most of the time. If parents are involved in most of the process with clubs, like they have a say, they could be involved in the training sessions or even overseeing training sessions. Like, to me, that's sort of a red flag, right? When I develop a program, and I've developed many programs, it's about fostering an environment of growth, not only from the player, but from also the parents' perspective. Because if the parents aren't getting educated and the club is not doing a good job to educate you on the recruitment process, great, that's further down the line. But if they're not educating you on how they're going to fundamentally develop your son or daughter, and there's not a matrix to show you how to do that, and then their actual sessions don't follow that, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of
coaches. You just described 98.9 clubs in the country.
I know.
Because I can tell you honestly, as a parent, my kids have played at a handful of clubs.
Right.
You have one meeting at the beginning of the season.
Right.
You maybe have one when you get in trouble for yelling at the referees because you're so frustrated and the coach is finally frustrated with you. And then you have like one meeting at the end of the season.
Yeah.
There's no education for parents. Like the coaches that I know that have done a good job is on a weekly basis, they send out an email and they go, hey, listen, these are the principles and the buzzwords we're going to be going over with at practice. Make sure your kid kind of knows these vocabulary, have them watch this little video. And then I'm going to test them at practice of these. Those are the best coaches I've seen, far and few between.
And what is it? It's communication, right? It's communication. Yeah. And people don't communicate well. But it's so important on so many different levels, especially within the recruitment process, right? Because you need to communicate as a human being to tell people what you want and what your goals are. So let's just get back to the development of the club. It's, what are we doing, right? Let's bring it back to some of the data science stuff and tie that in. Like, how can we give and educate parents on a level that they are still involved, but they're learning about the game, right? Is there some questionnaires that we could have them fill out throughout the game, throughout practice? So ultimately we shut them up, right, on the sideline, but also they're learning, right? Are there videos that they should be going through? what I used to love having my players do at the college level and started to do at the club level was breaking down film. But I wasn't breaking it down. I would break it down maybe once or twice to show them, how you go about it, but then give it to them as homework and say, give me 5 specific circumstances where you could have done something different with the ball that would have, led to a different pattern of play.
Outcome.
Right. Exactly. Like
anything other than what you did. Yeah.
Right. Where could you have been better? Right.
Sure.
Where did you do well? And I think that's important too. It's not just critiquing the mistakes, but where are you really solid? Right. And understanding that to gain the confidence. Athletes remember, for coaches, right? You could say 99 positive things to a player. You tell them one negative thing in a demeaning way, you're going to kill their confidence, right?
Yeah.
So just be aware of how you connect and communicate with players and educate them as much as possible. And just to tie it in, that's what we saw in the market, right? That's what Recruit Fluency is. It's identifying a market that is solely hell-bent on the scholarship, not on the long-term goal, and understanding that parents don't educate themselves early enough, so they get into an overwhelming frenzy, and then they're grasping onto anything they could get their hands on is going to help their son or daughter get to the next level, right? Yeah. And that's why these agencies and services, they barely even need a pitch, right? Because when you monetize fear, right? If you feel that you're in a meeting and you're monetizing fear and you're literally toying with their emotional side of things, that's a red flag, right? So Recruit Fluency was built on the backbone and the fundamentals of educating so that parents never have to be in that situation. And to me, I'm not in competition with agencies and services. If parents want to go down that route because they believe they need some hand holding, will we offer that? Yeah, but if you want to go in a different direction, great. Go through our program first, because it's going to educate you on everything you need to know to help defend yourself against some of the things that aren't necessary within the process. And I guarantee you'll save thousands of dollars, and your son or daughter will benefit from it immensely.
Right. No, I think it's great. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with us kind of breaking that down, because I know you're really passionate about this and you have a lot of experience in this space. So it's good for people to hear your perspective and to kind of hear the wealth of knowledge that you have and that you want to communicate. In just closing, we always ask one last question here on the Soccer Geeks podcast to our guests.
Yeah, sure.
And I've left it as a mystery until now too.
Yeah, I love it, yeah.
So here's a question I would ask you, Elliot. You are given complete power to make one sweeping change in U.S. soccer with no hindrance, no nothing. You say it and it's done. What do you change in this country, and to what end?
I would mandate that wearable technology was in every single club from the youth level throughout, so that every player can be tracked, every player can be identified, so that no player slips through the cracks. And I think that's what happens in U.S. soccer. There is no fluidity there's too many cracks and holes where players can fall through. Some of the best players, maybe that's, financially they can't afford to go to the ODP, tryouts or whatever that is, right? How would you potentially combat against that? Data science, right?
Right.
It's like it's right there in front of us for the taking. If the US would spend their money correctly, it would be on the education of coaches and getting players technology that could be tracked, so that they, as a governing body, could know where those best players are, because right now they don't. It's whoever is closest to that ID camp, or I forget what they call them, right? But they have these centers,
Sure.
right? Some people can't get there. So that's what I would do, and that would be my over sweeping change.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Hey, Marissa, why don't you come back in if you're still there? Yes, I'm at her back. There she is. Welcome back, Marissa, and thanks so much. Elliot, for your time. Marissa, go ahead and do your thing.
Yeah, really interesting to hear your perspective, obviously, dealing with it as a player, but also now as a recruiter. So I hope that our audience listening can learn something from it, and maybe we'll see some change down the line. So let us know where we can connect with you. I know you're on the socials and on the website, but what's the best way to get a hold of you to follow up?
recruitfluency.com, and you could always shoot an email to Elliot at recruitfluency.com. If you want to learn more about our program, go on to recruitfluency.com. If you have a specific question, shoot me an email. I'll respond to it personally.
Cool.
Thank you, Elliot. We enjoyed your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate you being on the show and all the knowledge that you dropped today, dude. We're really thankful for it. Yeah, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate the time and great questions. I hope it was impactful. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.